social nonsense.
We did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages, nor will we.
Read my lips.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
That the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan, period.
With your host, Matt Stevens.
Go. Hello. And welcome to Social Nonsense, part of the Matt Show Network. I am, of course, your host, Matt Stevens. And if you've never listened to Social Nonsense before, this is, I decided to split Batshit up into two shows because it's getting a little too serious for me. So the Batshit will be on Friday. That'll be all the crazy things said during the week. Social Nonsense will be now on Mondays, of course. And basically, we're just going to be talking about social issues. And the reason I call it social nonsense is because we shouldn't have to talk about this stuff. We shouldn't. It should just be, right? We should just have equality. We should just have it so that women make as much as men, and gays and lesbians and blacks and everybody is treated the same no matter what they are, or who they worship. But unfortunately, that's not true. And so we're here to, quote unquote, fight the social war as we move along with our day. We say hello always on this show and every show that we do about anything having to do with politics or anything, with a reminder that he's still in office.
Hail Trump!
Hail Trump.
Hail Trump!
Indeed. Indeed. Where we start today, though, is we're here again, right? Like we are starting to see that our country literally is the definition of insanity. Like the way we do and run and say and act is the definition of insanity. Today, if you don't know, is Juneteenth. If you don't know what that is, that's why we're here, to help you. Juneteenth, June 19th, is basically the day that is celebrated as the end of slavery. It probably wasn't the exact day. It's not. But it is recognized as the end of slavery. Okay? If you know anything about American history, you'll know that Union General William T. Sherman ordered that Union won lands along the southern coast, right? Redistributed to former slaves, 40 acres per family and a mule to do the work. 40 acres and a mule. That, of course, was taken away. There have been no reparations given to the African-American people, or the people whose relatives and descendants were slaves, were taken illegally from their home, brought here to work for nothing. Most died, or a lot died. So I hate to use the word celebrate, right? Because that just doesn't seem like the right word. I don't really know what the right word is. Celebrate just doesn't seem like it to me, but that's the only word I have in my arsenal. If you have a better word, you can tweet me at The Matt Show. So we'd celebrate that 2 days after we find out that the Philando Castile shooting, the cop that shot him, whose name is Geronimo Yanez, was found not guilty of second-degree manslaughter, I apologize, second-degree manslaughter, and the shooting death, of course, of Philando Castile. So we had video, of course, of the aftermath of the shooting. If you've seen the video, she says his girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, I believe her name is, said that he was reaching for his identification. The cop shot him. He died. Cop gets off for shooting people. And it's kind of amazing that we're still here, right? There was a report done that followed all the shootings between 2005 and 2017. This is via CNN. Now, they're saying that there are over 1,000 police shootings each year. And between the years 2005 and 2017, April of 2017, 80 officers have been arrested on murder or manslaughter charges for on-duty shootings. Of those cases, 35% were convicted, while the rest were pending or non-convicted. 35%. And we've seen a lot of them, right? Now, that doesn't even include something like Eric Garner, who was choked to death. This is just shootings. And we've seen some of the shootings. We saw the Mike Brown shooting. Well, we saw some of the Mike Brown shooting. We've seen a lot of these ones where we have it dead to rights that the guy did it, just flat out did it. and nothing happens. 35% conviction rate on only 80 officers that were arrested. So 1,000 police shootings a year, only 80 were arrested or even charged with anything. And then out of that 80, so out of that, what is that, 12,000? Out of that, say, 12,000 police shootings, 80 officers were arrested or on murder or manslaughter charges. And this is for on-duty shootings. And out of those 80, which is a freaking super low percentage of the 12,000, only 35%. So out of the 12,000, less than 40. Oh, God, it's less than 20 were found guilty. That doesn't even come into consider the amount that weren't even prosecuted, weren't even arrested, weren't even looked into. That doesn't even begin to talk about the amount of blacks and Hispanics who have been killed by cops before social media had the ability to tell us all about these things that are going on. Now, if you're somebody like me who grew up in a very metropolitan area, you've known about these things for a long time. You know that they've been happening for a long time. There are some places in the country where these things seem new. And they seem like, oh, this is a new problem, all of us. It's not a new problem. It's not a new problem. It's an old problem that has a new light shed upon it by social media. So 2 days, we have the acquittal or the non-conviction of the officer who shot Mr. Castilla. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. I do not mean to do that. I'm not joking. I'm from New Jersey. We don't really pronounce things correct, all right? I apologize. I really do. I do not mean to get his name wrong. Then yesterday, we have another shooting in Washington. Now, this one, I'm not talking about from that perspective. We don't necessarily know what happened yet. We have some of an idea. There was a woman who called in who apparently had mental problems and was pregnant. She called in a robbery. When the cops came, apparently they said she came at them with a knife and they shot her. We don't know what really happened yet. But I can tell you this. And I've never been a cop, and I don't want to be a cop, nor should I be a cop. But if we're to the point now where our cops... by the way, there were 2 there, which went against protocol because this woman had a lot of complaints before and had been in prison for some things with the police. She was later released because of mental issues. So you have this Charleena Lyles, Charleena Lyles, Charleena Lyles, who is now dead, was shot in front of her children. Or kids, whether they're hers or not, I don't know. Because she apparently went at the cops with a knife. Now, I don't know what happened. That may be exactly what happened. That may be it. But here's the thing. We're not teaching our cops the proper way to do stuff. If your first inclination is to shoot to kill a person who is much smaller than you and has a weapon that cannot do nearly as much damage as yours. I'm not saying that they didn't have a right to take action here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the action that they take needs to be looked at. The way that our cops consistently shoot to kill instead of maybe shoot to injure is the problem. It's not the only problem. It's a problem. It's a very big problem. Shoot to kill. We've seen many a video of crazy white people with guns being wrestled to the ground by cops. Now, they either are just afraid of black people, afraid and think that black people are just going to shoot them, remember what Hillary Clinton called them back in the 90s, which were super predators, and think that no matter what, even if they shoot them in the leg, they're still going to come at them. That's just not true. They're just like everybody else. They are, I promise. They don't have superhuman strength. They don't have the ability to absorb bullets and still run at you. They don't have any of these things. And so if your first inclination is to shoot at the head or the chest instead of maybe the arm, shoulder, or leg, well, then you need to reconsider your life choice of being a cop. Because you are not judge, jury, and executioner. Now, the problem is that they're going to get off. They know they're going to get off. It's 35% out of 80 out of 12,000 who get convicted. They know they're going to get off 99% of the time. And so therein lies the real problem, is the fact that these guys continue to be allowed to do this job after they do it. They get maybe put on administrative leave, which just means you don't have to go to work, but you still get paid. So you have Mr. Castilla, you have Ms. Lyles, you have Eric Gardner, you have just a litany of others that have been shot over just the past, say, 12 years that we know of, People who have been thrown in the back of cop vans and driven around to like die basically from trauma. Women beaten in cells. And the only thing here that we don't do is care. Let me put it to you this way. If that number were white people would lose their fucking minds. They would. They'd be going nuts. How dare cops just shoot us? We have rights in this country. And you do. You do. Cops are not judges. They're not the final say. They are the means to get us to the court system. They are the people who arrest the criminals. And the word there is arrest. I'm not saying brute and force isn't always necessary. That's not what I'm saying. But we are to the point now where we're seeing guys being shot walking away from cops. We're seeing guys being shot because the cop thinks he might be reaching for a gun, as opposed to maybe his fucking insurance in his glove compartment where everybody keeps their insurance card. He was pulled over by a cop. He'd been pulled over apparently like some crazy amount of times for being black. And this isn't new. I'm not breaking new ground on this. Not what I'm talking about. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to roll it into the Juneteenth because what we're seeing here is a systemic sort of nonchalance and fear of the black community that has continued for over 150 years. The fear that they can't be allowed to do anything. The fear that they can't be allowed to live among us. That they shouldn't be allowed to live among us. That fear right there, that's what causes this. When you hear the First Lady of the country call black people super predators, that's what causes cops to think this way. When you hear the young gentleman in St. Louis who was killed, when you hear the cops say, I shot him in the leg and he kept coming at me, when you hear that, instead of maybe just falling forward, right? Instead of maybe just like he got shot in the leg, so maybe instead of running at the cop, he's going to the ground, but the cop who is afraid for his life, or that's what he says, shoots the guy in the head. It's the irrational fear of the black community that has been passed down from generation to generation. And I say it's irrational because it's exactly what it is. Because honestly, let's be frank here, guys. The real people they should be afraid of are us. Right? Shouldn't they be more afraid of us? Shouldn't they be afraid if they see a white cop coming at them? Shouldn't they be afraid if they see a group of white guys coming at them? I would. I would sure tell my kids that. So on this day where we have protests going on around the country, where people are taking back public lands in a nonviolent action, they're going to reclaim abandoned schools, lots, that sort of thing, in a protest of the 40 acres and a mule. That's 2 days after the acquittal or non-guilty verdict of a cop who shot a black man who was unarmed in his car reaching for his identification. Now, we've made some steps. Black people are relatively free to walk among us, but they're not big enough. And it doesn't start with the law. It doesn't start with that sort of stuff, although we're going to get to that later with Jeff Sessions, our good buddy Jeff Sessions, who loves civil rights and black people so much that we always talk about Jeff and their rolling back of civil rights and the way they're going to do that. But on the day that we celebrate the day that we honor the end of slavery, maybe honor is a better word. Maybe I'll use that. Honor the end of slavery, where their peaceful protests, where black people the black community is taking back land that was promised to them 152 years ago. We see that the job is so far from being done, that the divide is so far from being closed, that I don't know if in my lifetime I will see it closed. We have a huge problem in this country where we allow our police to sort of just be judge, jury, and executioner and get away with it the majority of the time. We live in a society that sees the objectification of black men and black women on a daily basis. We're in a society where probably the richest athlete on the freaking planet, or one of them anyway, has the N-word spray painted on his front gate in California. Still. And why is that? It's not because of any laws that are passed. It's not because we had slavery as a country, although that is a byproduct of it. It's because for generations and generations and generations, we have told our kids that black people are dangerous, that black people are bad, that black people are scary, that black people want to steal from you, that black people want to rape you, that black people want to basically destroy the white race until there's none of us left. And that's just not true. It's just not. But that doesn't stop these people from doing that. And if you don't think that the police shootings and the people they're doing now, does it happen away? Of course, it happens to everybody, but it happens inordinately to black folk. That's the point, guys. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't just happen to black people. It happens way too much per capita to black people than it does to anybody else. And it's because of this ingrained fear, this ingrained scaredness of the black community that causes our police to shoot first and ask questions later. Then when with everybody else, they would shoot second and ask questions first. Now, how do we fix it? I don't know. You have to retrain cops. You have to make penalties in place for them shooting. If nothing else, they don't get to continue being cops even after they've killed somebody, unless it was without a doubt proven that he was defending his own life. In any other way, if it goes to court, he loses his job. Because if it makes it to court, there's some blame there, right? We assume there's some blame. If it never makes it to court, we assume that the shooting was good and was right and just. So there are ways to fix it from a society standpoint, but changing the hearts and minds, change the way we think about the black community as the white community thinks about the black community, changing the way that the fear that we feel, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the white community, the fear that they have of black people needs to change. And I don't know how to do that. I really don't. Because how do you change ignorance? How do you change racist thought? I don't know. We could start with reparations. That would be a good thing to start with. We never will, especially under this president, but we should start with reparations. I don't know what that is. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he came up with a good idea. This is a black gentleman that I work with, and he came up with a good idea that I was down with because we were talking about this. I like to talk about this stuff with people because I want to know. And he came up with a good idea for reparations. For 1 year, if you can prove that your family were slaves in this country and brought here illegally or were born here into slavery, for 1 year you do not have to pay taxes. Is that enough to pay for it? No, but it's an admission of guilt, right? Reparations, that's what reparations are. We could say all day long, yes, slavery was bad and we did bad things with slavery, but reparations are an actual admission of guilt and the olive branch being passed to them saying, we are sorry for the way we treated your people. We are going to try and do better and move forward and treat you as equals instead of as a lesser form of human. And that's what we can do. Are we going to do that? No. Of course not. Definitely not under this president. You must be out of your cotton picking mind. But lastly, I say this. If you see cops talking to a black man, stop. Record them. You are allowed. They cannot stop you. They can try and stop you. They can try and arrest you. They would be breaking the law if they do that. Okay? Record them. Let's make it so that, yes, they have body cams that can be turned on and off at whim. Make it so that everywhere they go, there are eyes watching them. So they know that they have to act in a way that isn't just shoot first, ask questions later. And when they do that, when we do that as a people, I do that. If I see a cop talking to a black guy, I will absolutely stop and watch, and I will take my phone out if I think something's happening. If everything seems calm and normal, and we're just having a conversation, I walk away. Other than that, I record, and you should record. You should, because that's the only way we're going to help stem the tide of this tragic nonsense that has to stop, where somebody who gets pulled over for a simple traffic violation gets shot because the cop thinks that a black guy has no other way of getting out of a traffic ticket than pulling a gun out of his freaking glove box and shooting the cop. Record, reparations. Those are two very small things that we can do. They're not going to fix anything. It's not going to end anything, but we can help. We can start stemming the tide of the racial disparity that's going on in this country. Because if we don't, it's going to end in another sort of civil war. Now, that may not be fought with guns, but it's being fought in our government right now. We're going to get to that later. It's being fought in our government right now. And we need to be there at the forefront of this, stopping this right now, because it's gone on too long. It's gone on way too long. It's been 152 years. It's been so long. And we're still talking about the same crap.
This morning, our country woke to news of another terrorist attack on the streets of our capital city. The second this month, and every bit as sickening as those which have come before. It was an attack that, once again, targeted the ordinary and the innocent, going about their daily lives. This time, British Muslims, as they left a mosque, having broken their fast, and prayed together at this sacred time of year. Today, we come together, as we have done before, to condemn this act and to state once again that hatred and evil of this kind will never succeed.
That was, of course, Theresa May, and she's right, because as we all know, terrorism is not simply a Muslim or Islamic thing. Terrorism is an idea. It's an actual thing that can be defined. I mean, the easiest way, it's the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. What the guy did today was terrorism. Apparently, he drove into a group of Muslims who were leaving their mosque after the fast, as Theresa May said, and was yelling things like, "It's our time, blah, blah, blah. This is revenge," and yada, yada, yada. "I'm going to kill all Muslims." You know. And apparently these are in response to the attacks that have happened on the country recently, the Manchester attack, the London attack on London Bridge, and all the other attacks that have happened. We are, as we were talking about with the racism thing, we are at such a tipping point right now with this, because we have two, we're fighting a holy war out in public, and nobody will call it that, right? Nobody will call it what it is, which is a holy war. We are fighting it, and it's between Christians and Muslims. And they can call it whatever they want. They can say it's terrorism, blah, blah, blah. But it's not. It's radical Christians versus radical Muslims. That's what it is. Let's be fair. I know plenty of Muslims. I work with a ton of them. And it's hard right now during Ramadan for them. They're in hot kitchens. They're cooking. They're working all day long. They can't have water. They can't have food. And they're very nice, and they pray, and they keep to themselves. And I would never, ever think of these people as terrorists, no matter how many times my city gets attacked. But that's me, because I understand the difference between peace and non-peaceful. I understand the difference between radicalized and non-radicalized. Now, do I know for sure? No, I don't. But does he know that I'm not? No, of course not. And, terror attacks, even by a white guy in their own country, gets talked about in a different way in England than it does here. Our president would never have called this terrorism. He would never have called it terrorism. They didn't even call last week terrorism. Well, they did because it was a Democrat. But if a Republican, let me put it this way. If a white Republican had run into a bunch of Muslims coming out of a mosque after their Ramadan mass or prayer or coming out after Ramadan, they would never have called it terrorism. They would have said, he's alone, he's just an angry guy. Oh, it's not terrorism. Terrorism is only for Muslims. But it's not true. We know what terrorism is, right? We know what it is. The unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. That could also be political and religious aims, because we are witnessing religious terrorism on an epic proportion right now. That's all it is religious terrorism. That's all this is. Jeremy Corbyn comes out, and him and Theresa May now they're not together on almost anything, but they're certainly together on this.
As I see it, this is a terror on the streets, and it's a terror of the people in the streets. An attack on a mosque, an attack on a synagogue, an attack on a church is actually an attack on all of us. We have to protect each other's faith, each other's way of life, and that's what makes us a strong society and community. These are people that I've represented for more than 35 years. I know many of them extremely well, and I feel their pain today, and I feel their stress today, and I think we have to all reach out and feel their pain and their stress. The only answer to this has to be strong communities together so that these dreadful incidents don't happen.
Do you ever think you would hear anybody in the Republican Party saying an attack on a mosque is an attack on all of us? But it is, right? It's an attack on all of our religious freedom. And isn't that what this country's about, religious freedom? Isn't that one of the main reasons that the Pilgrims came here, was to escape religious persecution? And aren't we doing the same thing? Isn't it what we're doing right now? Isn't it just religious persecution, just on a grand scale? But imagine our president saying an attack on a mosque in this country is an attack on all of us. He would never say that, because it wouldn't be considered terrorism, because it wasn't done by somebody whose last name was Muhammad or first name was Muhammad. That's the point. And that's why these attacks won't stop, not because terrorism is something that is embedded in the Muslim or Islamic religion. No, it's the exact opposite. It's the idea that if you keep bombing and killing and maiming innocents every single day, then the people who are related to those innocents, some of them will become angry and want to then kill you for it. But make no mistake, this is terrorism. Now, people will try and tell you differently. They will. The NRA is going to try and tell you differently, because terrorism can't be white guys. See, that's the point. They know they lose the argument if they ever have to consider terrorism coming from white people that aren't of the Muslim faith. Does that make sense? Good. And so on NRA TV, Grant Stitchfield had a guest on, Dan Perkins, who's doing a remote from his car. It's a really interesting thing. They're not really ready to call it a terrorist attack.
Well, I was going to first ask you about the maybe attack in London with, again, we had a van drive through folks, it appears, in front of a mosque. What do you make of early this morning's events?
A maybe terrorist attack in London. There's no maybe about it. He drove up screaming something about Muslims and getting all Muslims and attacking all Muslims. That is terrorism. You are using their religion as reason to kill.
Well, it's interesting. It's 180 degrees from the last one. This attack was civilians on Muslims. They ran into right outside of a mosque as people were coming out from the worship services for Ramadan, and the guy was shouting. Basically, he was saying, "It's our turn. This is for the people who got you killed earlier." So he was specifically out after Muslims, not after British citizens per se.
Okay, so Muslims can't be British citizens. Did you hear that? He was after Muslims, not British citizens, which makes it okay. Because if he's only after Muslims, then who cares? They're not There's no way a Muslim could be a British citizen. We know that's complete nonsense, by the way, because these people probably were British citizens. And if not, they were probably there on some sort of visa. And I'm sure there might be some illegals there, but not too many. Do I know that for sure? No, of course not. But I like to think better than they're just simply not they're not British because they're Muslim. Those two things are not exclusive. You can be one while being the other. It's okay. But justifying what the guy did by saying they're just Muslims and not British is justification of a terrorist attack.
But in retaliation for the recent attacks in London, one guy decided he was going to do something about it, and he ran his van. He killed one person and injured a bunch of others, but it was at a mosque in London.
All right, so we see an escalating number of attacks as that is still under investigation, and I would like to get more information about what really happened there, as it's still very early in this investigation, but something just seems odd about the whole thing to me.
Well, I would agree with you. I don't want to get false hope, but if you think about it, if you think about all of the attacks that have taken place all over the world by Muslim terrorists, there's been no reaction from the people of those communities. There wasn't really any reaction in France or England or Germany or any place else. Now all of a sudden, and this could be a one-off, this guy in London decides he's going to do something about it by attacking the Muslim community, which has been attacking their country.
Okay, so that's not true. The Muslim community has not been attacking England. Radical Muslims, ISIS, Al-Qaeda have been attacking London, not the Muslim faith. Because if we can separate, again, people who bomb things like, I don't know, the Oklahoma City bombing, or bomb abortion clinics, or kill people in a Charleston church, if we don't call those people terrorists, then it's okay. It's just the Muslims doing that. See, if we call those people terrorists, then we have to differentiate between the Muslim religion, the actual peaceful branch of the Muslim religion, and the probably less than 1% of people who are considered radical Muslims. But they don't want to do that. See, they explain it away very easily. And there you go. And the thing is that the people who are watching this, the people who are seeing this, they're getting an idea from this. We talked about last week on the Batshit Crazy Pants Super Show about how the rhetoric needs to stop, and that this is violent rhetoric in its own way. Because by justifying this attack as being somebody who's attacking the Muslim community for all the attacks that have happened on London is condoning his act, is saying that it's okay. Ask the 17-year-old Muslim girl, Nabra Hassanin, if it's okay. She was beaten and killed in Virginia, I believe. Okay? There have been plenty of instances, by the way, of people retaliating, plenty of instances of Muslims getting beat for no reason. And so while you sit there and you try to normalize this attack and justify it by saying that it's okay because, you know, he's just defending his land from the Muslims who have been attacking his country, that's not okay. It's just not. And the violence of that rhetoric is calling to arms that it is okay to attack Muslims who have because all Muslims are responsible for terrorism. That's what they're saying. And that's not okay. It's less than okay. It's less than not okay. It's justification for use of excessive force in the name of God based on a holy war you're having. And then he says this.
People refer to moderate Muslims. There is no such thing as a moderate Muslim. Either you believe in the Quran and Sharia law or you don't. There's no middle ground.
Okay, so there's no middle ground for Christians then either. Either you believe in Christian law and the Ten Commandments or you don't. So that means no more divorce. That means no more sex before marriage. That means no more playing football, touching the skin of a pig. That means I can buy your daughter. That means I can do a bunch of different things to you. If we're going to call a spade here, then let's do it. If you think that there is no difference between radical Muslims and regular Muslims, then there is no difference between radical Christians and regular Christians. Right? You see how it happens, right? If this had been a Muslim who had attacked white people in London, these guys would be calling for the heads of every Al-Qaeda member or ISIS member they could find. But it's a white guy, and the justifications just keep on coming. They're back. Oh, they're back. Yes. The Supremes are back. Oh, baby, we love when the Supremes are back. The Supremes are back in a big way. They did release some decisions today. We'll get to one of those decisions. Another one that might help Dan Snyder, but I'll talk about it more on my sports show. The big news that came out of today, though, is that the Supreme Court will consider whether gerrymandering election maps favoring one political party over another violate the Constitution. This is by Rob Barnes in the Washington Post. They have seen a case like this before. This is a Wisconsin case that was brought forth, which divided a 3-panel judge last year. The judges ruled that they had to redistrict or go through and redo the things. The Supremes stayed that decision so that the Wisconsin people argued that it would be a waste of money if the Supreme Court found that they had not, in fact, gerrymandered under racial or political terms. Now, this is big, right? Because in 2020 we get another election and we get they're going to do another census, and then, we figure it all out again, right? And this is huge because you have other states like North Carolina, you have Wisconsin, Maryland for Democrats, and many other states where you have just massive redistricting. And John Oliver did a great thing on this because not all crazy-looking district maps are bad. Some of them are done that way to keep sort of, people together. The problem that we have is this. We're seeing an abnormal amount of winning happening based on percentage of votes. So you have Wisconsin was, where was it? It was after the 20 it was in the 2012 election, I believe, okay? They had just done their redistricting. And when the election happened after they adopted the new maps, when the election happened, Republicans got 48.6% of the statewide vote, but captured 60 to 39 seat advantage in the state assembly. So you didn't even get half the vote, yet you almost got half of the state assembly seats. That is a clear problem of redistricting, of gerrymandering based on political terms. And what they do is they do it in a couple different ways. So it's hard to necessarily track, because what they might do is they might split a Democratic district so that those votes become watered down, or they might stack a lot of Democrats in one place and make a district abnormally Democratic in order to make that sort of watered down as well, so it doesn't mean anything. There's tons of ways they do this. Now, the problem is that the Supreme Court is Republican right now, of course, as it always seems to be, and they've kind of given themselves an out as well, where they said they will further consider their jurisdiction over the case when it is heard on its merits. So they could literally hear the case and then say, no, this is not our jurisdiction, which is pure crap because it is their jurisdiction. Let's be fair. Let's just put it out there just like it is. This happens on both sides of the aisle. It happens way more for Republicans. They have way more to lose by losing this case because they own something like 37 of the state houses and whatnot in the country. Republicans will say that, the reason that Wisconsin goes that way is because the majority of the Democrats live in Milwaukee and Madison. And that may be true in that state. It may be. It's not true in North Carolina, though. It's just not. And it's also not true in Maryland, where Democrats are doing the same crap. Redistricting, the drawing of lines to make representatives and voting borders, so to speak, should be done by people who are independent from everything. It should never be done by the politicians who got voted in because they just want more power. They just want more power to be given to their party. So of course they're going to try and make it so the state never goes red or blue again. Of course they are. And the Supreme Court will never find this. They will never, ever, 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 ever vote and say that these redistricting laws, they're just going to weasel out of it. They won't even vote on it. And we know if they do, it's going to go 5-4 because Kennedy is a friggin' the worst. He's a moderate. If moderate means Republican, then that's what he is. So we will still have to do the gerrymandering. We'll still have to deal with the idea that Republicans can pick and choose and draw the lines the way they want to draw them so that they keep winning no matter how many votes they get. Just look at the 2010, 12, 14. It might have been the 2012 election where Democratic House members got almost 2 million more votes, yet didn't really gain any seats. That's gerrymandering. If those votes are spread out over more places, they have more chances to win, and they don't want that. Wisconsin doesn't want that. North Carolina doesn't want that. Maryland doesn't want that. And so in the end, this will become nothing, even though the idea of it is good and they should look at it. And they do have jurisdiction over it because it is. And it's not partisan. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's just bad practice no matter what. And you, as the Supreme Court, should make the law that representatives of a state should never be allowed to draw a state map. It should be done based on census data done by mathematicians. That's what should be done by. It's not hard. I promise you it's not hard. But we have some more news on the Supremes. They did hand down a couple of opinions today. One of them is in the Packingham versus North Carolina. I'm not sure if that's what it's called. That's what I'm calling it. Lester Packingham was a sex offender, or is a sex offender. I guess you don't stop being a sex offender. And he apparently got dismissed of a traffic ticket, and he went on Facebook to celebrate this. Praise be to God. Wow, thanks Jesus. Sex offender thanking Jesus is totally awesome, and that's all good. He probably found God to not be a sex offender, but apparently that is against the law, and so now they arrested him because in North Carolina you can't do that. Felony in North Carolina law. This is via Vice News and Carter Sherman. North Carolina law violated. It is a felony for sex offenders to use, quote, commercial social networking websites if they know people under 18 can access it. This case went all the way to the Supreme Court. They found that North Carolina was in the wrong here, and that he is allowed to use social media as long as he is not breaking the law. So I assume as long as he is not doing something that whatever he was convicted of sex offending for, whether it be touching, pedophilia, rape, whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as he's not doing anything like that, he's allowed to post anything he wants because the First Amendment protects it. And that is a great decision. It was actually unanimous. And this is why it's wonderful, because that's what free speech is. Free speech means that there's going to be people who don't like the speech or the speaker, but that's not the point. We don't limit speech based on crimes you may have committed or might commit. We don't limit speech based on who you are, or what you believe. And the fact that North Carolina would have this law is typical of North Carolina, and the idea that Republicans always want to limit what people do and not what companies do. And so the Supremes actually got it right today, guys. They actually nailed this one, all right? Because they are coming back and they're saying that, you know what? The First Amendment goes for everybody. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. If this guy's a sex offender, it doesn't matter. As long as he's not posting sex offender stuff, I don't know what that is, but you know what I mean, then he is perfectly within his rights under the First Amendment to do so. On to our good buddy and our good friend, Mr. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. So a couple months ago when he took office, he wanted the DOJ to look into consent decrees and their use in civil rights cases. Now, if you don't know what a consent decree is, it's basically an agreement that the DOJ or whoever's litigating the case comes to with the city, town, or whatever they're going up against, and they impose restrictions and different things that you have to achieve in order to have these to whether to desegregate schools or to whatever it may be, whatever civil right violation has been broken in that city, state, whatever. These consent decrees are there to enforce, and without an admission of guilt, it's saying, you guys have a problem. It's sort of like rehab for racists, right? For state racism, right? So like they say, you have a problem here with racism because of police brutality. Like Washington, for example, Seattle, okay? Well, the young lady who was killed in Seattle. Well, in 2011, the DOJ investigated them. They found they had an abnormal amount of police brutality happening, and they did a consent decree, and now that number has dropped considerably because of the rules they had to follow in order to continue to not face charges or whatever. It's almost like a plea agreement, sort of. Now, the DOJ wants to stop using these. They don't want to get rid of them. They don't. It's like when Trump said, "Are you on my guy?" You don't need to go after Mike Flynn. It's sort of that way with the consent decrees. They would rather you go with a they're not. Oh man, they're not. It's like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like only as a last resort. So they're not making them illegal and they're not getting rid of them. They're just not using them anymore, okay? They'd go with settlements instead, which is monetary or whatever, which are essentially toothless. And this is all via a ProPublica article by Jessica Huseman and Annie Waldman. Now, the DOJ will tell you that this is so to get rid of backlog of things that have happened before. That, of course, is pure nonsense, and we know that. What this is there to do is to make it, and they're laying off many people. The DOJ, Department of Education, is getting rid of 40 people in their civil rights area. They're doing the same things. They're going to stop basically going after, looking into civil rights violations in schools and things like that with kids, and they're going to stop doing that. The EPA is even doing it with workplace stuff. 40 positions in the Civil Rights Office for the Department of Education. And these consent decrees, although not perfect in their own way, some of them, the Obama administration was accused of being overly excited when they used a lot of them and would tie up a lot of time and money for the people that they were going after. I don't really care about that. But it can help, and in the case of Seattle, it sort of did help because of what happened recently, but there's always going to be stuff that happens. But their rate of police brutality did drop. They have been known to help with desegregating schools and things like that. But watch throughout the entire government as they get rid of these things, as they get rid of civil rights litigators in each office or under each secretary. Watch as they do that. Because what they're telling you is that either there's no more civil rights problem in this country, which we fucking know is not true, or they're saying we don't care, we don't want to spend the money, and it's not worth our time because, hey, it's just black people, gay people, trans people, women. It doesn't matter. It's not white guys, so who cares? And so the DOJ, when we all knew this was coming, because we talked about it a couple months ago, when they said they were going to look into the consent decrees, and it took less than 3 months for them to decide that they're bad, and they're rolling back the use of them. They're not being used anymore. And so what do we have? We have a president who says he's for everybody when he's not. We have we have Jeff Sessions as our attorney general, who we know he has one problem with the KKK, and it's not the fact that they hate black people and only white Christian men. It's the fact that they smoke weed. And they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. They're going to make it easier for people to not hire you because you're black or a woman or gay. They're going to make it easier for somebody to discriminate against your kid in a school because he might be black, a girl, or gay, or transgender. Bathroom bills won't be argued or fought against because the DOJ won't care about them. They are basically putting a hold on. You're going to have to do private litigation at this point if you want any help in any sort of civil rights manner, because what this is telling you is that the DOJ doesn't really care. And I know what you're saying, Matt, how can they say that? Because those consent decrees were a great way for the DOJ and the city-state to work together to end the problem that they have. And whatever that problem is, whether it be systemic police brutality, whether it be things that are happening in schools, whether it be state and local work officials who are making laws that are racist, or voter ID laws, or whatever, those things are no longer going to be looked at or argued by the DOJ. And if they are, what they're going to do is they're just going to throw money at it. They're just going to settle. They're not going to come up with ways to fix the problem and help to stem the tide of the problem. They're just going to settle. And so if you're a woman, if you're a black person, if you're a Hispanic person, if you're an Asian person, if you're gay, transgender, lesbian, it doesn't matter. This is bad for you on many, many levels. Now, you knew it was coming, but it's actually here now. So you can forget about if there's a crazy law put forth by a crazy Republican-led state about transgender bathroom laws or whatever. The DOJ is no longer on your side to fix these problems. They have either decided that they're just going to throw money at it, or they're just going to let it be, because it doesn't really matter, because those people aren't important anyway. Finally today, our good friend Joey B is back in the news. And I got to tell you, folks, it really, really bugs me, the news that he's in today, okay? And listen, you know me. The Biden memes are some of the greatest comedy I've seen in a long time. And Joe Biden was a vice president. Was he good? I don't know. I don't remember hearing from him for very, very much. During the election, sure. But other than that, no. A recent poll was conducted, and that Joe Biden leads with 74% of Democrats to be the lead candidate in the 2020 election. If Joe Biden right now in the year 2017, when we are 3 years. No, it's about 3 years away from the election. That Joe Biden is the best one that we have to offer. The other people in contention are, of course, the usuals. You have Elizabeth Warren, you have Al Franken, you have Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris, who probably has just recently come into there after her great stuff with Sessions last week. There's two names on there that I'm willing to consider, and Al Franken is not one of them, and neither is Cory Booker. Al Franken is a great senator. He is a very good politician. He should not be president of the United States. And I know what you're saying. Ronald Reagan was president of the United States. That's true. But Al Franken shouldn't be president of the United States. He just shouldn't. Do I have a reason for that? No, I just don't think he should. But if you want to run Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren, I'm down. Let's go. Let's do it right now. But in no way, shape, or form, should freaking Joe Biden be leading this right now. What is that saying about the Democratic Party? There is absolutely no leadership in the Democratic Party, none whatsoever. We are less than a year away from the midterm elections, and our leading candidate is a guy who wasn't even in it last time. He wasn't even in it. Bernie Sanders is too old. In 4 years, he'll be too old, and I don't care what people say. That's not ageism. It's just fact. You cannot run Cory Booker. Cory Booker is... He's so far up Wall Street's ass. You can't trust that you're going to get the movement here. And the only way to win is to cede somewhat to the Bernie Sanders movement. Now, I'm not saying you have to make it somebody straight out of the Bernie Sanders playbook. Elizabeth Warren actually floats on both sides very well. Kamala Harris floats on both sides pretty well. She would be appealing to both. They would both be very appealing to either side of this. But the idea that today, on this day, on June 19th, 2017, 3 years and 6 whatever months away from the election, from the 2020 election, and Joe Biden is the leader in the polls. We are screwed, guys. We have so little time before the next election cycle starts. We need to take back seats coming up in the next election. We need to win back as many seats as possible. And let me tell you something: if looking in the not so distant future, and Joe Biden is the guy leading it, I don't know. Joe Biden shouldn't even have been in that. By the way, he shouldn't even have been in that poll. Should not even have been in it. But we have a problem on the Democratic Party side, folks. You have a huge problem on the Democratic Party side. There's no leadership. And I talked to my father about this the other day, and he's like, well, there is leadership. They're doing stuff. And I'm like, yeah, they're doing stuff in the House and the Senate. But on the grand scale, what are we hearing about? Yeah, and they're doing okay in Georgia. But part of that is a little bit of Trump rollback. And that guy is still tied. And tied going into the election is bad for Democrats in Georgia. It just is. It just is. Now, it may come out that he wins, Osnoff. But when you're tied going into a Republican district, it's not going to be easy to win that. What is the plan? What is the plan to win back the House and the Senate? That plan needs to start today. It needs to have already started. But we don't have one. Because because the Democrats are too busy still fighting about with Joy Reid and Bill Maher about who's responsible for Hillary losing the election. Well, I can tell you who's responsible for it. Her name is Hillary Clinton. As soon as she became a senator and she sold out all of her beliefs because she was being given money, that's the day she lost the election. And I know you're saying, Matt, that was like 15 years. It doesn't matter. The minute that she changed everything she believed in because she started accepting money is the day she lost the election. So let's move on and move forward. Because if we don't, this is going to be a 4-year run of Republican in the presidency, Republicans owning the House and the Senate. And you think a 2-year run's bad? Hell, you think a 6 months run is bad? Imagine a 4-year run. After they win back and they keep the House and the Senate, the mandate they will say they have will be so destructive to us, it will not even be funny. And the fact that Joe Biden leads right now tells you that the Democrats are nowhere. They are absolutely nowhere. Thank you so much for listening to Social Nonsense every Monday night at 6:30. Have a great week, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with sports and then Friday with Batshit. As always, Clint plays us out.
Farewell and adieu to you. fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain, for we've received orders for to sail back to